Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to install OpenSSH server, and then we're going to alter the configuration file, and then we're going to log into our Linux terminal on our client PC, not our server, our client. We're going to generate a new key, and then we're going to transfer it to the server so that the only way we can log into our server via SSH will be our new key. And then we're going to test everything in the end. So first thing is first, we have to make sure we have OpenSSH server installed. Now, if we go back to the guide that is down in the description below, first we can see here is we have to install OpenSSH server. Now, by default, most servers already have this installed. It may not be enabled on some of it. You may have to enable it, but for the most part, it's always been installed. But we don't have to worry about enabling it right now because we're going to actually alter the config file before we do anything as well. So first thing is first, let's just verify we have it installed. So sudo apt install SSH, or sorry, open SSH server -y, and it says it's already been installed and it's the newest version, which is good. If yours is not, it will go ahead and go through the update process, which will only take a few moments to do the installation. Now, what we have to do is we want to change our port. Now, the default port's 22. Now, every person that has Google can figure this out. By default, we do not want to leave any ports as default because we don't want to leave it vulnerable, especially if we're going to be allowing this access to the outside world. I don't want to leave it at port 22 because that's just giving people a very easy way of getting into something. So if I'm trying to compromise your system here, the first thing I'm going to try to do is I'm trying to go into attack root and your SSH port, because there's a very good chance you're not sitting at your servers all day long. You're using some kind of SSH software to connect back and forth to your Linux terminals and your Linux servers. So I want to change that to something else. Now the port that I chose is 2200. You can choose any port you want as long as it's not a default port. Example, 22, 23, 53, 80, 445, 486, 487, and so on and so forth. It all depends on what it is, but try to pick something that has 4 numbers. So, example, 4598. Look at that. That's a random number. That's a good thing. And it's going to make it more difficult for me to figure it out. Which is, again, much easier for you to have to not worry about somebody always trying to hack the system. Again, this is no guarantee that somebody can't figure out your port. It just takes them longer to figure it out. And that's what our main goal is, to put so many different blocks in front of somebody that they just get tired of trying and then moving on from there. So very simply, it's going to be sudo. Now the text editor I like to use is nano. You may choose any text editor you want, like Vim or VI or whatever, but I always like Nano, always used it, so to me, I'm going to stick with Nano. And then we're going to go to etc SSH and then SSHD config. Press enter, and then you'll be greeted with this page. Now we're going to come back to this a little bit later towards the end of this portion of the tutorial. But right now, I want to just get my port changed automatically. I want to make sure that changing the port is going to actually work right out of the box. So even if I don't do anything else besides changing the port, at least I know that, at least I'm somewhat more protected than just having it blatantly open the 22. So you're going to scroll down to where it said port, and you're just going to remove the hashtag by deleting it, and then just changing the port to whatever you want. So like I said, if you want to make it 4583, you can. There's no problem with that. But to keep the video simple, we're going to just add 2 zeros at the end of it. Then you're going to press Control X to save, Y, and then enter. Now we're going to have to go ahead and restart the SSH config because it's honestly not going to figure this out yet because it's already been started. So whatever we do in that config file will not take place until we restart the system or restart SSH. So it's a very simple command. It'll be sudo, if I can spell, system control, restart, SSH. Now, very simple command, sudo system control, which handles all the services. We're telling it to restart the SSH service. Press enter. And as long as you're greeted with nothing besides, as you can see on the screen here, another blinking cursor, everything worked out well. If you ended up getting some error message, you need to go back to your SSH config file and then correct whatever error that you're actually having. Now, if you want to see if it actually is actively running, you will go to sudo system control status SSH. Now, because we restarted SSH, you should now see where it says active on my screen. It should say active on your screen. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go and log into our Linux terminal on our client PC and then see if we can SSH into our new server here. Okay, so I'm now logged into my client PC and then I'm going to open up our terminal. So as you can see here, I'm using Linux Mint. Again, there is no, as you can see, I have a different username, different setup, so there's no trickery going on here. So the first thing we want to do is we want to test to make sure port 22 is actually not accepting communication. So SSH, you're going to type in the username and the IP address of the server that you're trying to connect to. And that's it. So if you don't change to port 22, this is how you're going to SSH into the server, or into any computer technically if you don't change port 22. So we're going to press enter. As you can see, we have connection refused because it's not accepting an answer on port 22, which is exactly what we want. I want it to sit there and give me that, so at least I know that my config file has been applied to my SSH server. So to go ahead and actually connect to it, we're going to type in the same thing, but we have to add which port to connect to. So you're going to hit space -P, which means port, and then type in the port that you want to go to. So space 2200 for me. Press enter. You're going to be prompted with a encryption key fingerprint. You have to press yes or no, or type yes or no. So I'm going to go ahead and type in yes. If you just type in Y, you just get an answer saying you have to type in yes or no. Then you'll be greeted with the password. So I'm going to type in the password. And there we go. We are all good to go. So now I'm able to log into it. If I type in top, I see that all the system that's running on there, and we're good to go. As you can see here up top, it does now say admin at Debian, which is the server I'm working on. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create the encryption key. And the encryption key for the server is very simple. So what we're going to do first is type in exit, because we want to log back in. Oops. We want to be logged back in out of the server and back on our own. So as you can see here, I'm now locally connected. But if you want to be sure you're not connected to the server, very simply close out of the terminal and just open up a new one. It is perfectly fine. So first thing is first. Now, considering we've already tested SSH, we should now have an SSH folder already built into the system. To verify that, very simply just type in cd.ssh. Now, if you go into a folder that actually has that .ssh, you should be good to go. And what that means here is that we went ahead and already SSH into another computer, and it's created not folder, but a file called known hosts, which means that it's already connected to the host back and forth. Okay? But we want to now create an encryption key for our server. Now I went ahead and made myself some notes over here just to make it easier for myself. So we're going to go ahead and move things around just a little bit for us. Okay, so the first thing is we have to now create the encryption key using RSA. Now there are a few different encryption keys we're going to use that we can use, but in this video we're going to use RSA because that's the simplest at the moment. So we're going to go ahead and copy and paste that right into our terminal, exactly as is. We do not need to run it as sudo, because if we run it as a sudo, it's going to break the encryption key and we're not going to be able to log in anyway. So we go ahead, type in SSH, -keygen-t-rsa. Pretty much what the command is, we're going to create a SSH key. We're going to generate an SSH key. The T stands for which type, and the type we're going to use is RSA. Press enter. Now the next parts are going to be fairly simple. Where do we want to save the file? We want to save it in the .ssh folder, which is perfect. So we're going to enter at this point here because we want to save it in the default, which, as you can see here, is our default location. Now, this is an option for most people. I like to put this on only because I feel it adds an extra level of security. Enter passphrase. Now, when you create the encryption key and you put it over there and you don't put a passphrase on there, it automatically logs you in as long as the credential is correct. The keys are matching. So when you go to log in, it's not going to ask you for a password anymore. You know, it's just going to say, oh, he's got the public key, he's got the private key, we're good to go, log him in. I like to add this because what it does is that it says, hey, what's the password for the encryption key? And then if they don't know the password, they still get blocked from the server. So this is up to you and how you want to do this, depending on what kind of level of security you want. Me personally, I like to put a passphrase on here. So a passphrase can be any of your passwords you want. If you kind of want to make it the same as your admin password, you can. That's on your server. I don't recommend it, but you can do it that way as well. You'll be prompted to enter the same one again, and then you'll be generated your fingerprint key. Now, you don't have to use a passphrase. If you don't want to use a passphrase, just hit enter at both of them, and it's just going to skip past it. But me personally, I like to always put a password on there. So as you can see here, it went ahead and generated our key. There's our random keyR image, and then we're all good to go. Now, you can go ahead and steal this information. It doesn't bother me because it's not going to work. But this is something you would not want to show people to the real world if you're using a live environment. So very simply, if I type in ls right now, because we are still in the .ssh folder, you can see now I have 3 files in there. The ID RSA, which is the private key, and the ID RSA, which is the public key. The public key is the key that we're going to give out to the server. So the next part of it is, I'll go ahead and actually write this out. SSH copy -ID, which means we're going to copy an ID through SSH. The actual ID that we're going to copy, which is -I, will be in .ssh ID RSA.pub, which we say we want to copy the public key over. And then it's going to ask where and which server. So I want to do it to my admin server at 192.168.3.10 on port 2200. Make sure you do this correctly, because if you make any mistakes or you put it to the wrong folder, you do anything like that, you're going to pretty much botch up your whole server. And then you're going to have to go back to your server, remove SSH, and then go ahead and reinstall it, or pretty much remove the keys off of SSH to go ahead and fix your problem you're having. So make sure that when you're doing this, you're copying over the public file and that you're doing it to your correct information. So mine, again, is admin at 192.168.3.10, and the port that I chose is 2200. So make sure everything is correct. Press enter. You'll be prompted with the password for your server. So it's asking me for my admin password on the server, so I'm going to go ahead and type that in. And now it says that everything went ahead and we're looking good. So now we have 2 ways of logging in. The other way, which we already did, which I'll show you. The original way, which is SSH admin. Oops. Trying to go ahead and copy that. So I can just go ahead and show you over here as well. Okay, so you have 2 ways of doing it still. You have our traditional way that we did the first time, but now with the encryption key, it gives you a very special way of actually logging in. So SSH-P, and then the port, which is 2200, and that this code. So we're going to go ahead and try to use this. Exactly as you see here. So make sure you have your quotes in there, and so on. Press enter. and it's not functioning for some reason. So let's, oh, okay, forgot to put a space in there. Okay, so now see, as you can see here, my private key is locked. So if I'm unable to enter this key, so let's say I'll just type in the wrong one, I get an error saying I can't log in. And as you can see here, failed to log in. So let's go ahead and close it out. So let me go ahead and try it again. Type in the password that is correct. Now I can do this as well, automatically unlock the key whenever I'm logged in. That's a preference for anybody else. Me personally, I usually have that turned off. Again, more security. So if somebody's actually at my computer, okay, they can't just automatically do this and be like, oh, he's stupid enough to leave the password, logged in every time. Good for him. And there you go. So as you can see here, I went ahead and logged me in, and didn't even ask me for the admin password because the keys was correct. Now you still can log in. So let me go ahead and exit out of this. You can still log in though using clear text password. So if we do, where is it? The original way, well, unfortunately on here, it's not going to show me that. So let me just go ahead and bring up Putty real quickly. And I'm going to show you on Putty that even though I don't have a key on my Windows computer, I'm still going to be able to, SSH into the server. Okay, so I have Putty open here on my Windows client. So I'm going to type in 192.168.3.10, which is the server, and at 2200. There's nothing else added to it. There's no special keys. I didn't put any encryptions on it. As you can see, authorization's all set to blank. Hit open. Log in. I want to log in as the admin and the password. And as you can see, I'm still logging in. And this is something we don't want to do because there's no reason then to have the encryption key if we're still going to be able to allow people to log in, using the regular clear text passwords. So I'll go ahead and close that. So as of right now, we are all done with our Linux terminal on Linux Mint. And now we're going to go back to the server, and then we're going to edit the config file just a little bit more, and then we're going to come back to the file here, to the client here, and then we're going to go and test out the encryption keys on both the Linux terminal you see here and the Windows Putty to see if we went ahead and locked our SSH configuration. Okay, so now we're back on the server. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go back into our SSH config file, and we're going to edit a few things inside here now. All right, so let's go over to my little guide here. All right, so when we get to here, we're going to now want to change a few things. We're going to want to permit root login to no, password authentication to no, use PAM as no. Okay, and then we're going to want to add a user list and a deny list as well to it. So say you have multiple users on your server, you would only want, say, the admins to be able to SSH into it. Nobody else can, or nobody else can use other users. So when you put an allow list in there, it only allows whatever is on that list to connect. So even if I want to try to log in as root or say another user, if it doesn't actually match the allow list, they're not going to let them in no matter what, even if they have the encryption keys right and so on and so forth. Same thing with the denied user list. When you deny a user, even if he has all the correct encryption keys and everything else, if he's on this list down here, he'll be kicked out. So I'll give you a quick example. You have admin, you have Joe, and you have Jeffrey. All three of them were on the allow list, but now Joe quit. So we're going to put Joe on the deny list because we're not sure if Joe has his keys on other computers or whatever he may have done. Now, can we check for it? Yes, but we really just kind of want to get him banned right away while we go through the system. So when I go ahead and add Joe to the denied user list, he will be automatically prompted with all the same stuff. So he'll add the encryption, the password will come up. But once it goes ahead and checks this file here and realizes that Joe's in the denied list, it's going to automatically give him an authentication error, meaning that he's on the denied list and not allowed to connect. In that case right there, he'll know that he's no longer allowed to do what he has to do, and he cannot cause any harm to the system if he deems necessary. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to go ahead and maximize this screen. And then we're just going to do a little bit of scrolling. So we're going to scroll down, okay, to authentication here. Now authentication, you can see, has permit root login. So we're going to delete the hashtag so that now it's active. And we're going to change it to no at the end. So delete everything at the end and then change it to no. Now next thing we're going to look for is password authentication, yes. Now as you can see here, this pretty much disables clear text passwords, and we don't want clear text passwords to be allowed to be used on our server. So we're going to go ahead and uncheck that and change that to no. We also want challenge response authentication to set to no, but with the newer version of SSH, it actually has it already set to no. So we don't have to worry about that. Now at the bottom here, you have use PAM, and again, we're going to change that to no. So right now we've pretty much removed any way possible that if you don't have an encryption key on here and we turned off password authentication and challenge response turned off on both of them, and then we don't allow root to log in, when we set PAM to no, pretty much just says, hey, if you don't got an encryption key, we can't let you in at this point. Now, a few other things you can do here is the X11 forwarding. If you don't use it, I usually turn it off. So I set that to no, but this is an optional. You don't have to. It doesn't affect it because a lot of people don't use X11. And what X11 does means if I'm able to log into your server, I'm able to actually open up screen capture technically through SSH. It's pretty cool. You can use it in some ways, but I usually turn it off because I don't bother. If you're going to use SSH, you're going to use a terminal. We're not going to open up Dolphin and all that stuff and program files. So the last thing we got to do is create our allow and delete user or deny user folders. So all the way at the bottom here, as you can see, I can't go any further down. We're going to type in exactly as we can see. So hashtag allow users. And underneath that, we're going to type in allow users, just as you see there. And we're going to type in the username exactly as you created. So I created mine all lowercase, so I'm going to make sure it's all lowercase. If you make it capital, it's not going to work. And then same thing with deny users. Another hashtag in front of it. Type in deny users as you see here, and then type in the word root. So now what we're going to do is once we did all that, we're going to hit Control X, press Y, enter to save it, and then we're going to go ahead and restart SSH again. And if we want, we can verify the status. As you can see, it is running. So now what that went ahead and did was it disabled pretty much any other way we can get onto the server without an encryption key. Now, if you want to add an encryption key to the server, you will have to go back in there and re-edit them. So say, for instance, if you are going to want to add an encryption key, you can, well, one, manually copy and paste it directly over to the server. But in Windows, you can't do that. Well, you can, but you can't just easily go with that. You have to copy and paste it. If you're on a Linux server, you can still SSH the key over to it as long as all the credentials work. It will accept that information still. So if I did do the SSH copy ID to that server, as long as everything's valid, it will accept that that method of installation. Because unfortunately, other than that, the only way to install an actual key is to come here and physically do it. So as I'll show you real quickly, all your keys are located in this folder under authorized keys. So if I go ahead and open it up, there's my key, as you can see, for my Linux Mint. So if I want to add another key, I would just have to pretty much copy and paste it into here and then save it. And then from that point, we're good to go. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hop over to my Linux Mint terminal, and I'm going to go ahead and try to SSH back into it again to make sure, one, I can still connect. And then after that, we're going to log into our Putty through our Windows terminal, and then we're going to see if we can connect through that as well. We should be denied through Windows, and we should be allowed through Linux. So let's hop on over and see if that's the case. Okay, so now I'm back over here on my terminal for Linux Mint. And then we're going to do what we did before. So SSH-P 2200 admin at 192.168.3.10. Press enter. And then look at that. Logged in directly with no questions asked, no reason for any kind of passwords because we've already verified all our passwords and our encryption keys. So I like this. This is very good. We're looking good. So now we're going to hop in on our Windows SSH client, and then we're going to see if we get the same exact message as we got here. Okay, so as you can see here, I have Putty up and open, and let's go ahead and try to see if we can get into it. Now again, just to show everybody here, I don't have any authorization keys put in, nothing installed, so this is just as vanilla as we're going to get. Okay, we're going to go ahead and click open, log in as admin, and there we go. No supported authentication methods available. Server sent public key. So what that means is that it doesn't have a public key or a private key associated with this server to this terminal in Windows, so it's not going to let me on the server. So with all that, I think we actually went successful here. So to recap, what we did in this section is we went ahead and installed OpenSSH server. We went ahead and created an encryption key on our client for Linux to our server. We verified and tested that it worked. Then we went ahead and configured our SSH config file to block any kind of clear text passwords, anybody who's not authorized, and pretty much anybody who doesn't have a key on the server. And then we went ahead and tested it again to make sure that it worked on our Linux server or our Linux client, and our Windows was denied access completely. So our next portion of the video will be installing the extra security features on our server, as well as installing Fail2Ban and UFW, which is a Linux firewall. So let's go ahead, hop on over on our server, and let's finish this video up.